Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 146 of Humanity Rising. Humanity Rising is an initiative of Ubiquity University and over 350 partnering organizations from all over the world that have come together during this extraordinary pandemic to create an open space on a daily basis so that people worldwide can come together to share their experiences and solutions and ideas and visions and hopes and prayers for a better human future. We have all been challenged. All of us, sometime or other, have been under some form of lockdown. We're engaging in social distancing. And human norms worldwide have been literally turned on their heads. Human beings are very social. We're used to touching, and we're being told to stay in isolation, wear face masks completely appropriately. This is what the science and public health demands. But it's also challenging us to recreate the instrumentality of intimacy. What does intimacy mean when you can't touch? Well, we're on Zoom and we're being live streamed on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn and partner channels all around the world. And we're experiencing through Humanity Rising I would say a deepening community of people who deeply care and passionately work day in and day out for a better future. And I just want to acknowledge that. I want to appreciate it. I want to thank everybody who so consistently has been present and supportive. It's been, as we were saying yesterday, a deeply rewarding and gratifying experience to be part of humanity rising in all the plenitude of ways in which we've celebrated over the last months. You know, we've covered every conceivable issue. We've tracked remember George Floyd and the viciousness of racism that just popped out of nowhere and just dominated the news and caused protests across the United States. Nearly 500 cities in the United States erupted into protests over that killing of that young Black man. And then we tracked the ongoing deepening of the pandemic that many people thought was just going to be over, and it wasn't over. And watched how country after country experimented in how to deal with it, and watched how the United States, the highest levels of government, basically decided not only to do nothing, but to deny science and ridicule social distancing and wearing face masks that generated a super spread contagion that has made the United States the worst country in the world in terms of the number of COVID rates and the number of COVID deaths. We watched the US election and watched how Trump tried to sabotage the election, continues to do so. And in the face of that, the American people voted overwhelmingly in an exercise of democracy that was a light to the world as to how things can be done, even under duress. And this week we came to a beautiful spaciousness. And we started with the matter of grief and just commune with one another about how important it is to acknowledge our vulnerability and to grieve that which is lost. And there is much to grieve for, as we all know. And then we journeyed into science and what the great physicist David Bohm and the great Indian Hindu avatar Krishnamurti had to say about the unity of everything. Our grief is contained in a cradle of compassion. We grieve because we love. We love because we're connected with everything, everywhere. That's the implicate order that David Bohm talked about in his physics. And then we went even deeper. And the next day we traveled into the depths of geometry and space. How is the unity of everything held together? What's holding the universe into a single, integrated, living, information sharing, precision, guided, living system? What is it? Pythagoras, 2,500 years ago, discerned that it was geometric shapes and mathematical equations that, when they come together, produce sound. That's cosmogenesis. That's what knits the unity into everything and the everything into unity. And then yesterday we went even further and grappled with this notion that we're nature. If it's all one, we humans are not distinct. We're one with everything. We are planet Earth. We are the environment. And it's our capacity to understand that and live it day by day with a joyful embrace of our oneness that generates wisdom. And now today, we want to finish the week with probably the deepest mystical tradition in the West. And that's the Kabbalah. And we have with us a practitioner of the Kabbalah, Zvi Ish-Shalom, who's a professor of wisdom traditions at Naropa University and has created a group called the Kedumah, written a book called the Kedumah Experience. And as a practitioner of the Kabbalah, he will be in dialogue with me today. So before we welcome Zvi, let us take a moment and let us close our eyes and take a couple of deep breaths. And let us place our attention on our heart, and in a spirit of deep thanksgiving and gratefulness that we are alive at perhaps the most extraordinary moment in all of human history. Let us listen to our heartbeat. and feel the heartbeat of all sentient beings. Thank you, everyone. Now, with an open heart, I want to welcome Zvi Ish-Shalom to join and to talk for a few minutes today about the extraordinary work of the Kabbalah. Those of you who know the history just a little bit know that the Kabbalah rose in the 13th century Spain. But the content goes back to before history began and has informed Judaism in terms of its oral tradition from the very beginning, and then was codified in a particularly brilliant and elegant way in the Zohar. And that generated a renewal of Jewish mysticism. So Zvi, welcome to our program here on Humanity Rising. And I'd like to begin. I'd just like for you to tell your story. I'd love to take your time and tell the story of your awakening into the wisdom traditions, your discovery of the Kabbalah, what it means to you, which one of the schools, because there are many, do you tend to belong to, or are you ecumenical and belong to all of them? Let's start with just tell us your journey into the Kabbalah.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much for having me today. And I want to say blessed hello to all who are watching right now. My personal journey actually began with Kabbalah, I would say, at birth. I was born into a very traditional Jewish family of rabbis. And so from a young age, I was immersed in the practices and teachings of traditional Judaism. And because my family even came from Hasidic roots, which was a popular version of Jewish mysticism that developed, in the 18th, 19th centuries, I was pretty kind of familiar with the logos of Kabbalah in general, although did not have a deep appreciation for the esoteric practices, since they were generally not taught in elementary and high schools. But as I entered into my teenage years, I became more, I would say, passionate about the inner journey, and began to explore the nature of consciousness more through the framework of the very orthodox Judaism that I was living in at the time. And so what that meant was really embracing the tradition of prayer that I had inherited. That was a kind of daily regimen of liturgy in Hebrew, as well as the whole constellation of ritual practices that constitute the daily life of a practicing Orthodox Jew. Now, at that time, I never even heard of mysticism or Kabbalah beyond kind of a concept, So my journey into Kabbalah really began from the inside out, I would say, because as I followed this thread that brought me deeper within, and I began to embrace a more contemplative approach to the normative practices of Judaism, I began to experience phenomena that were, not, I would say, described, at least not overtly in the tradition, and as these experiences began to open and deepen, and my consciousness and my perception of reality began to shift, I naturally sought explanations for what was occurring. And that was the first time that I found the Kabbalah, because in that investigation, trying to make sense of my experience, my inner experience with the norms of practice, I had an opportunity to unpack some of the esoteric mystical teachings within my own tradition, and in that process I fell in love, you could say, with the teachings and the texts that I began to really dive deeply into, that for the first time in my life explained experiences that I had and understandings that I had come to about the nature of reality in a way that was able to refine and make more precise and appreciate in a more robust way the full potential of what I was just beginning to tap into.
What was, let's go a little deeper here. I'd love to hear more about what was it about the Kabbalah, that really was attractive to you, and maybe you could, offer for those of people who don't know the Kabbalah, your definition or your sense of the tradition that produced the Kabbalah, because I think it's something that is deeply mystical and ambiguous to many people. So I would love to hear just a little bit more about, what was your pathway into the Kabbalah? How do you understand the Kabbalah? What historical tradition are you resonating with? To speak to those issues.
Thank you. Yes. So as you mentioned, the Kabbalah is classically quite opaque to the non-initiate. And one of the reasons that's the case is because it is really a linguistic mysticism at its core. That is to say that Kabbalah is a wisdom lineage that transmits an understanding of the way that language carries the primordial essence of creation within it. It's as if words and letters are capsules of the primordial light of reality, the original formless, dimensionless, timeless nature that manifests into the forms of creation as we experience them day to day. And so in the Kabbalah tradition, this is, connected to the Hebrew language in particular, because that's the language that, through which the ancient sages of Kabbalah organized and framed their experiences. So for me, since I had grown up in that tradition and I was intimate with the language, when I first started to see how the Kabbalists would decode and deconstruct the letters and words of the Torah, the Hebrew Bible, and not just the Hebrew Bible, but the whole spectrum of the oral tradition of Torah, because Torah is a Hebrew word that means teaching. But really, in the traditional Jewish world, the word Torah doesn't just refer to the Hebrew Bible. Like if I say the word Torah, I expect that many of our participants, joining us this morning, might immediately think of a text, like a scripture, the Hebrew Bible. But traditionally, it's actually much broader than that. It includes all of the oral teachings. And from the Kabbalistic perspective, it's even broader than that. It's more akin to the way we use the word dharma in the Buddhist tradition. It really is the essence of the path. It's the way, it's the truth. It is, in fact, according to the Kabbalist, the light itself, the light of creation. And so on that level of Torah, the language of the text is simply a garbing of the hidden light of creation, which is what is animating not just our individual consciousness, but is animating all of reality. And thus, when we engage texts from the Kabbalistic perspective, or prayer, or words, the words that I'm speaking right now, on the surface level, if we just take it at face value, if we swallow the pill, the medicine of the word that's being offered, but we don't digest that pill, that capsule, in order to extract the nutrient that is hidden within it, then we haven't really gotten the true medicine. And what the Kabbalists teach are how to receive. The Hebrew word Kabbalah actually means receiving. How do we receive the transmission of the primordial light, that is the light of the infinite? Traditionally, it would be referred to as or Ein Sof, right? The light, the endless light, which sometimes is articulated through the paradigm of the divinity, the divine light, right? If we receive that light in its capsulized form, that is to say, as a word, as a letter, and we don't extract the light that is hidden within it, then we have swallowed the pill, but we haven't extracted the medicine. Conventional religion, institutionalized religion, when it is devoid and disconnected and dismembered and disembodied from the essential heart that is animating the tradition, it's like taking the pill but not extracting the medicine. And so what Kabbalah does is it comes along and says, wait a second, all of these beautiful treasures that you have been offered, all of these rituals, all these prayers, all of these words and letters, right, are not just sounds in order to communicate for utilitarian purposes, but they are magical seeds of divinity. And in order to extract the medicine that's hidden within it, you need to know how to decode, how to deconstruct the words and the letters. We need to know how to read the words in a manner that elicits the treasure hidden within it. And so the Kabbalah teaches not just how to decode the really what it is not just the words and letters, but really how to decode the clothing of reality. For as we know, if we've all seen the Matrix movies, which is based on this Kabbalistic principle, the Hebrew words and letters are in fact the building blocks. They are the atoms and the molecules that make up the phenomenal world as we experience it, right? And so deconstructing a word or a letter is not just, it's not just engaged as a, as a shallow heuristic device of imparting information, but it's actually a way of deconstructing the mind, the conditioned mind, our ordinary forms of perception that we have deeply cathected onto as reality. And as we deconstruct the words and the letters, in this case of the Hebrew, but I would argue the same principle can be applied to any words and letters, even the ones that I'm speaking right now, and the words that Jim is speaking right now. There's light hidden within each word, right? And so we can apply the same principle of deconstructing what is on the surface, appearance, in order to see more clearly what is actually here beneath the conditioned superimpositions of our conceptual mind. And so you ask, where did the Kabbalah come from? And earlier on, Jim, you mentioned that it has ancient roots. I would take that even further. If I were to piggyback on that from a Kabbalistic perspective, we would say the ancient roots of Kabbalah are not just ancient in time, that is to say, in linear time, but they are ancient in terms of our being. They are more primordial. They are based in the primordial ground of our consciousness, which is the source, the wellspring from which creation emerges, not in past time, but in each and every moment. Reality is emerging from this primordial, ancient ground of our being. And so Kabbalah is one technology that provides us with a mechanism and a teaching and a path of how do we reconnect to the ancient primordial nature of our consciousness that is prior to the emergence of concepts of the conceptual mind. And that is the Edenic reality, the Garden of Eden, sort of principle, reality prior to the superimposition of dualistic modes of perception. And so Kabbalah is about returning to our ancient roots, the ancient roots of our nature, of our being, so that we can live each moment as an expression of that primordial light of the infinite, so that the finite and the infinite, right? The unity and the multiplicity, the formless and the form, the classic, sort of dialectical kind of expression of many mystical traditions, this question of how does the one become the many? How does the infinite become finite? This is the key question that the Kabbalah carries in its bosom as it offers nourishment and gift to the world. It says, here the infinite and the finite can be experienced as one indivisible reality, that the human and the divine, the absence and presence, the unmanifest and the manifest, they are indivisible. They are one reality. Monotheism from the Kabbalistic perspective is not one God sitting in the sky. It is one indivisible reality where the body itself, our embodied experience, our incarnation is itself an embodiment of the infinite as an inseparable whole. And so the Kabbalah, the receiving, is the receiving of the transmission from the primordial ground itself in its spontaneous arising of creation in each and every moment. And the sort of techniques that the Kabbalah offers is shifting our modes of perception, you could say, sometimes subtle, sometimes, grand. But that shift of our perception is really looking anew at reality from a new place, from a new recognition or rememberment of ourselves. And when we do so, we start to be able to read not just the black letters that are written on the page, but we start to also begin to see the white letters that are the spaces between the words, between the letters. And it's in that spacious ground of the empty parchment that we come into unity with the unmanifest nature and our union with it as embodiments of the one into the many.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. Thank you. It's I don't know quite where to begin. There's so much inherent in what you just said. But before going into some of the doctrinal, I would say, perspectives of the Kabbalah, I want to return just momentarily to this notion of linguistic mysticism, because it's a fascinating thing that many of these ancient languages, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Greek, among others, that each letter corresponded with a certain number. And if you put the numbers together, it's called gematria, I think it is, where you put the numerological significance of a particular letter and the numerology, bearing in mind Pythagoras's insight that what constitutes reality itself, beneath and through all the atoms and molecules and Plancks and photons and protons and nucleuses, however you want to break it down, in the end, you've got geometric shapes and mathematical equations and sound. So I just want to dwell on it just for a moment, because that to me, Zvi, is really the kind of the urgrund, the primal ground of it all. And I'd love to hear you just speak a little bit more about this relationship between sound, letters, numbers, and light and truth. Because what it means is that, our languages aren't just randomly evolving phenomena that just kind of like the river flowing back and forth, and all of a sudden you come up with French. But these ancient languages were crystalline. They weren't just amalgamations, they were conscious crystallizations of the universal principles and truths at the deepest possible level. And so anyway, just shed some more light on this. It's such an extraordinarily beautiful subject.
Yes, thank you for bringing it up. It's the constellation, the relationship between sound, number, speech, light, right? That's what I heard you mention, is so core to the Kabbalistic project of awakening, really, and of the interconnectivity of reality through this crystalline matrix of the primordial language. And I'll share just one way that this is refracted through the Hebrew language, because for many people who read English translations, for example, let's say of an ancient holy text, like the Hebrew Bible, for example, what oftentimes is not understood or appreciated is how whenever we translate a multidimensional language such as Hebrew, right, which is based on a root system similar to Sanskrit, right, where you can have many words that are formed from a 2 or 3 letter root. And what that means is that like a whole kind of constellation of terms is formed from a shared root. And that points to an intimacy of meaning between all of these different words, even if they have distinct and more precise applications in the context of the grammatical structure of the language. Nonetheless, they share a common core seed form, if you will. And so whenever we translate a word like a Hebrew word into English, we are erasing that multidimensionality, and we have to choose, in some sense, one definition that fits whatever context we ascribe to it in that verse. And we have taken a living, dynamic, vibrating presence of a word, and we've reduced it into a static, person, place, or thing, or verb. Right? Now, the reason why I'm speaking to this is because I'll give you an example. There's a Hebrew word. The word is the root is samech peresh, and these 3-letter root can form several different words. One word it forms is the word. A word that means, it's the same exact 3 letters. However, if they're pronounced differently, because Hebrew is a consonantal language, it's based on consonants. There are no vowel letters. Vowels are implicit and defined by context, right? So if you have 3 consonants, those 3 consonants can be pronounced in several different ways, depending on how we place the vowels. Yeah. So if we take those 3 letters that form that root, it can become the basis of the word, lispor, to count, lisaper, to speak or to tell, right? It's the basis of the Hebrew word sifirot, which if I'm sure many of our listeners have heard that term. It's a Kabbalistic Hebrew term used in the Kabbalah to point to the divine qualities or emanations of light that form the 10 sefirot of the tree of life. This, ancient diagram that maps out kind of the cosmic structure in the Kabbalistic system. Yeah. The sefirot are the lights of being. So this same word that means number, that means speech, also means light. And of course, the word sefer means text, book. So these 4 dimensions that you mentioned, right? Text, speech, light, and number all connect in a very intimate core way with one Hebrew root. And that's why it's called the Sefer Torah, the Sefer, the Torah as a Sefer. That is to say, it is not just the linguistic, but the mathematical, linguistic, luminous expression, articulation of divinity itself, of the infinite. And it is for that reason that when the Kabbalists connect a numerical value of a word, they are, in a sense, disrobing God, right? They are disrobing, they're uncovering the surface layers of reality and peering into the hidden dimensions, the dimensions of reality that are not typically visible to the ordinary eye. And so when I take a word like the Hebrew word ahava, which means love, and I begin to contemplate, what is the nature of love, right? So on one level, someone could say, well, I was in the coffee shop and I saw somebody sitting at a table and I fell immediately in love with them. I had this experience of, infatuation. Yeah. So that's one level of love, right? But then if we spend some time with this person who we just met, we might discover that they weren't anything that we thought they were, that we thought that they were at first sight. right? Not only do we not love them, we don't even like this person, right? So we've sort of revealed, right, that our original vision, our original seeing was incorrect or was not accurate. Yeah. And so the Kabbalah says that what we usually see, the way we usually see reality, is like is typically very one-dimensional. And one way to actually see the multidimensionality of reality is to begin to reveal, and we can use the matrix of numbers and letters as a tool in Kabbalah in order to help us do this, is to reveal the hidden underlying structure, the crystalline structure, the atomic level of the word. We start to break it down and look at the numerology. So for example, the Hebrew word ahava, the first letter aleph, the numerical value is 1. The second letter is hey, the numerical value is 5. The third letter is bet, the numerical value is 2. And then the last letter is another hey, the numerical value is 5. So that's 1 plus 5 plus 2 plus 5 equals 13, which means that the numerical value of the word for love is 13. Right? So the Kabbalists would say, what other word has that same numerical value? And then we can begin to build a cluster of concept terms that are pointing to more of the hidden dimension of what this word is an expression of, right? And so we take the word echad. The Hebrew word echad means one, unity. Echad is 1. The first letter is aleph, numerical value is 1. The second letter is chet, numerical value is 8. And the third letter is dalet, numerical value is 4. So that's 1 plus 8 plus 4, 13. So here we see how the principle of love and the principle of oneness are intimately entwined, so that when I see the person, when I think I'm having an experience of love, if we really want to inquire into the true nature of love, we cannot understand true love without understanding the truth of oneness.
Beautiful.
That's where the luminosity then, that's where the light can be found. That's the connection between the number, the letter, the word, and the light. And as I speak it, I'm bringing in the speech, right? And this is how we share our medicine with each other as human beings. One way, one key way, is through the mechanism of speech. And this has also primordial roots in it, right? One of the earliest texts in the book of Genesis, when it describes the cosmogenesis, as you brought up earlier, the key verse that describes cosmogenesis actually is a verse that says, Vayomer Elohim Yehi Or Vayehi Or. And God, usually translated as, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. That's the first act of creation, right? How does it occur? It occurs through speech, through divine speech, right? So this is also, of course, refracted in the Christian tradition. In the beginning, there was the Word. If you look at the beginning of the book of John. So the Word, the principle of the logos, of creation as articulation of divine speech. We, as embodiments of the divinity itself, as we are, according to the Kabbalah, sort of cells of the divine body. We are, we are part of the body of divinity, since the body of divinity is the cosmos itself, is the earth itself, right? And as such, we also have the capacity to create through our speech. And this is another key principle of the Kabbalah that has been developed in different directions by the traditions of Western occult magic, for example, right? The principle of abracadabra. I saw, everyone grows up saying abracadabra, right? Before you do a magic trick. Yeah. Where does that come from? That comes from the ancient Aramaic. Aramaic is a sister language to Hebrew. And the language through which the Zohar, Jim, that you mentioned, was written in. So it was actually seen to be the preferred language of the Kabbalists because of the magic that it contains, right? In the Aramaic, abracadabra, abracadabra, abracadabra. I will create, abra, kedabra, as I speak. As I speak, I will create. See? So the tradition of magic has its roots in this principle of the power of speech that we embody as human beings comes from our intimate relationship with and as expressions of the divine principle itself. You see? So just as the divine nature creates through speech, so too we create through the power of our speech. And so when I speak to the relationship of ahava and echad, for example, love and one, it takes it out of the abstract and out of the mental realm and brings it into the realm of sharing our medicine with each other, of affecting each other in deeper ways, right? When we receive someone's words, especially if they're words of truth, if they are words of light, we are deeply impacted. I am deeply impacted when someone speaks from a place of truth, right? Because it like carries the light medicine within it, the light of creation, the light of divinity. So that's another way that the function of speech connects to the principles, the constellation of number, word, and light itself.
Beautiful. Abracadabra.
Abracadabra.
Aramaic is such a beautiful language. Neil Douglas Klotz has written a number of books, representing the Lord's Prayer, for example, or the Beatitudes, or many of the sayings of Jesus in Aramaic. And it's just worth noting that this language, which is essentially extinct after all these centuries, was used by Jesus and by the Kabbalists as a primordial form of linguistic mysticism.
Yes.
That was so deep and rich. I appreciate you bringing this out, and I hate to leave this subject because it's so rich and complex, and really everyone gives us this sense that when we think of equations, geometry, language, they're not separate functions. They're functions that are integral to one another and have been since primordial time. And these ancient languages understood that, which we've forgotten. And within that spirit, I just want to shift now, Zvi, to some of the richness of the Kabbalistic tradition. I want to talk about the Ein Sof, because it feels to me that we've had this Abrahamic tradition popularly codified in the Bible of God as man, kind of a glorified man who speaks and moves around and changes his mind and punishes and is merciful and interacts with Abraham or Moses almost as a senior partner in the firm. But the notion of the Ein Sof, the notion of the ground of being as what God is. It's not sort of a person as much as a ground of being. Speak to us a few minutes about the Ein Sof, and then I would love to have you segue into the Shekinah, into how being, the ground of being, as it moves into manifestation, shapes itself in the polarities of masculine and feminine. And then the role, because the Kabbalistic tradition has such a refined understanding of the feminine. It's almost as if its understanding of the feminine was freed of all the patriarchal incrustations, so ancient and so present, even in medieval, 13th century Spain. And yet somehow the Kabbalah just was liberated from that. So speak to us about those matters.
Yeah. So before I connect to Ein Sof itself, I want to just mention the way that the God of the Bible, right, the old man in the sky, or this personified kind of expression of divinity that, which is what we usually encounter in our Sunday schools or Bible schools, whether in church or in synagogue or whatnot, is not the God of Kabbalists, right? The Kabbalists do not relate primarily to that vision of divinity. In the Kabbalistic perspective, again, when we return back to how to read the divine language, we see that the Hebrew word that's oftentimes, there are two primary divine names in the Hebrew Bible that refer to God, actually. One is typically translated as God. So if you open up an English Bible, you'll see the word God written in English like that. And but the most common Hebrew divine name is translated as Lord. So there's Lord and there's God, right? Both of which are mistranslations. So one of the biggest challenges, you could say, to shift into a Kabbalistic mode of perception is to erase everything that we had learned prior about the tradition. And when it comes to the divine names, that is key. And I'll explain just for a moment, if we have the time, why that is, right? The word that's translated as Lord is a Hebrew word that's constituted by four letters: the Yud, the He, the Vav, and the He. It's four letters. Sometimes you'll hear it pronounced Yahweh or spelled YHVH in order to try and transliterate those four Hebrew letters. The word itself, however, does not mean Lord at all, not even close. The Hebrew word that is translated as Lord is actually an impossible verbal construct that is a synthesis of three of the three tenses of the verb to be, of being: is, was, and will be. Haya, hoveh, and yihiyeh. When you combine those three Hebrew words together, you get the verb Yud, He, Vav, He. Now, why is that important? First of all, it's important that it's a verb because God, or divinity in the Hebrew Bible, is not a person, place, or thing, and it's certainly not a he. It is it's the dynamism of being. It is, was, will be as a verb, right? So it is the very dynamism of being itself that is the primary referent for divinity in the Hebrew Bible. That in and of itself should completely, radically alter the way you look at the Hebrew Bible from now until eternity. I'm speaking to all of us here, right, that are joining us, right? That this is not meant to be a literal, hyper-literal text. It's meant to be a transmission of the crystalline primordial matrix of sound, language, of sound, letters, and light. Yeah. And as such, that principle of Yud He Vav He, of being itself, in the Kabbalah is associated with the masculine principle. So I'm sort of tying this into the latter end of your question around the masculine and feminine. And then I'll bring it back to Ein Sof. So this masculine principle is the principle of the formless nature of being itself. That's the Yud He Vav He. The feminine principle is the divine name Elohim. Elohim is the Hebrew word that is oftentimes translated as God in the Hebrew Bible. Yeah. So when you read the first verse of the book of Genesis, then it states, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God there is Elohim. Okay. Elohim is a Hebrew word that the first most important point of it is that it is plural. It's not singular. It is a plural word that does reference the noun Eloha, which means God or divine, some kind of divine being. Yeah. But the point is that it's multiple. It represents the multiplicity of the divine nature. It represents the formless principle of being coming into form, into creation, into the multiplicity of the phenomenal world as we experience it. That word Elohim, which is plural and representative of creation, that's why it's featured in the very beginning when it talks about creation, is the feminine principle. And so we have the masculine principle. Now, this is, of course, a common traditional way that these mystical principles are categorized. If you look at Hindu Tantra, it's similar, right? You have Shiva as the masculine principle, as the unmanifest ground of empty stillness and silence. And then you have Shakti, the manifestation of that principle into creation, into formation, into expression, in its sort of infinite variety of modes of articulation, a feminine principle. So in Hebrew mysticism, very similar kind of structure. And so the feminine, the reason why the feminine was really, you could say, you mentioned in the Zohar, for example, and in the Kabbalists of the 13th century in Spain, and in particular, there was almost a kind of obsession with the divine feminine, right? It's like it takes up the greatest percentage of airtime, you could say, in the Zohar than any other topic, right? Is the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah, which means the dwelling, the indwelling, right, is a term that is used to refer to this principle of Elohim. It is the indwelling of the primordial light of Ein Sof, and I'll come back to Ein Sof in a moment, into creation, as formation, as expression, right? Now, many mystical paths have a preference for, you could say, the masculine principle. It's about transcending the earthly realm or the human realm to attain some kind of more abstract, ground of unmanifest nature, of dimensionless, timeless, spaceless, nature. In some cases, that's the quintessential kind of attainment or realization. Yeah. The Kabbalistic tradition, the reason why it's obsessed with the feminine is because it has a very different preference than that. Its preference is actually to turn toward the human earthly realm, to turn toward the human life in its incarnated beauty, in all of its variety of shapes and colors and flavors and sizes and modes of expression, right? It's like the earthly realm is the queendom, and it is the queendom, the realm of the Shekhinah, within which the full fulfillment and realization of the infinite nature is fulfilled, is attained, is realized. And I'm going to explain just for a moment more. So I hope everyone's still with me here.
We're with you. We're with you.
Okay, because this is the key point. The key point here is that for the infinite to truly be infinite, yeah, right. Like the reason why traditions that prefer this masculine sort of transcendent path is a little bit blindsided from the perspective of the Kabbalists is because it is only in the fullest embodiment and realization and fulfillment of the incarnate sort of cellular inhabiting of flesh and life and creation that the infinite is fully realized. Why is that? Because to deny the finite as a real, true expression of reality is to limit the infinite. The infinite is only truly infinite if it can also experience itself as finite, as a fully human, fully individualized form. It is through that contraction, if you will, of the vastness of space that all possibilities of reality come into fruition, you could say. So the denial of the feminine, the marginalization of the feminine, right, which we all know is a kind of one of the consequences of patriarchy, as a kind of overarching paradigm of domination, is itself a dismembered, dissociated form of realization. Yeah? And so the Kabbalists were all about actually inhabiting flesh, embracing everyday life, the life of flesh, the energies of the body, the sexual life, the life of community, of work, of engaging the world, of affecting the world with, with a connection to the primordial light of goodness. That is how we as human beings fulfill our potential, by turning toward the feminine and embracing her wisdom as the fulfillment, actually, of creation. Sof ma'aseh b'machshava techila is one of the phrases the Kabbalists like to point to, right? That the end of creation was the first in mind, meaning that it is in the full expression of duality that the infinite ground, Ein Sof, realizes its infinite nature, you could say. So Ein Sof, you could say, is beyond the categories of infinite and finite. It is beyond the categories even of being and doing, or of the primordial ground. And it's beyond the categories of masculine and feminine. Ein Sof is that mystery which contains all. It is the body of totality. In some sense, we can compare it, if we, to the Dharmakaya, to the principle of the all total nature, within which no dialectical or dichotomized concepts compute. And that is why the Kabbalists did not describe Ein Sof, and were adverse to even trying to attribute any attributes to it. Actually, it's similar to, like, I don't know, like Brahman, for example. I'm just thinking one example, like in the tradition of Advaita Vedanta, right? There's the principle of, no attributes can really be ascribed to it on the Nirvikalpika Samadhi level, right? That there's just simply nothing could be said about it. And that's actually how the Kabbalists were related to Ein Sof. As soon as we say something about it, we are no longer in the reality of Ein Sof, because Ein Sof is that, it is that mode or that truth. And even that, again, I'm saying too much, right? It is that sort of principle that cannot be named, that cannot be spoken, because it is the mystery from which, or again, the time space reference or also don't apply to it. Nothing simply can be said about it, but everything and all of reality is contained and an expression of it. What the Kabbalists like to talk about is the light of Ein Sof. The light, you could say, that is an expression of Ein Sof. That is the primordial light, and it is the incarnation and embodiment of that primordial light that is the feminine.
Beautiful. I mean, you think of the Gnostic notion of emanations, that before the beginning, in that timeless, wordless void plenitude, the Ein Sof, and then somehow it begins to emanate, and it emanates out through myriad demiurges and Sophias and qualities of refinement until it forgets itself. And then the task is to remember, to remember back. And that was why I was struck by your comment at the beginning of your remarks about the fact that this is really a remembering of who we are. This is not a discovery of something unknown. This is what is the most deeply known, the most deeply who we are, that somehow in the emanations of being out to finally our small little galaxy and our sun and then planet Earth, by the time all that got to us, we'd completely forgotten. And therefore the task is, as Plato said, is a famous allegory of the cave. It's just, we're shackled, not by somebody else. The shackles on our wrists and feet, he says, are put on by ourselves and our traditions and our conventions and our cultures. And then one miracle happens, and Plato says, you can't know why. Somebody will stand up and turn around and see the sun. And that image, that allegory from Plato was just coming up in my mind, Zvi, as you were talking with your poetic passion about the Ein Sof and the different manifestations of being. And so I'd love for you to comment on this notion of remembering, and how do we access that plenitude that's the most deeply real part of us that we have so completely forgotten, given the way we've structured our world right now. We're about ready to go extinct because we've forgotten this. How lead us in a pathway of remembering?
Yes. Yeah, the principle of remembering is core in this path. And I like the word remembering in English, actually, because it really does reflect my understanding of one of the key ways that the Kabbalists employed the art of remembering. And that has to do with the body, right? And that's why I like this English word, to remember, right? Because to dismember, right, is to dislocate or disconnect the body from itself, and to remember is to put the body back together. To remember, to put our body back together. And so much of what so much of the dis-ease, I would argue, that we suffer as a human collective at this time is our dismemberment from our bodies and from the body of the earth, from our planet, from which we are emanations, right? We are offspring of the earth. Our bodies are constituted by earth. So our dismemberment from the planet and its consciousness, its living, its life, and its destiny, its organic spirit of unfoldment, the degree to which we have, abused and raped and dismembered ourselves as a human collective, right, from the earth, is the degree to which we are actually disconnected from our bodies. Because when we connect deeply to the living consciousness of the atoms and molecules that make up our own body souls, our bodies of living consciousness, right, which is the closest thing to us, we don't have to go anywhere to find ourselves. All we have to do is take a moment. If you join me just for a moment right now, I'd like to invite all who are present here in this moment, right? We all have a body. We have a living, vibrating expression of consciousness, infleshed in matter right here. So if we just take a few breaths, and with each breath, really sense into, like as if the breath has fingers, fingertips. The breath is like getting in touch, is actually touching into our body from the inside out. As the breath enters and fills our bodies, we're actually feeling and sensing into the living inner body of presence. And so you see, just even in this moment, as we explore this, right? And everyone who's joining, you can play with this right now. You can allow the breath to assist this remembering our consciousness with our living body. Feel the kind of sensing consciousness expanding all the way down into our feet and into our legs. What does it feel like to be enfleshed? Down into our arms and our hands. See, and as we explore it, you might start to feel like there's actually an inner living presence that is present here in the now, that we have access to at any moment. And with it comes actually a shift of consciousness, like we actually start to feel more connected to ourselves, not in some abstract way, but actually very tangibly, very concretely, right? So remembering can be as simple as this, as remembering our bodies with its organic nature, which is also, I believe, a path of healing forward for our planet and for our human community. The degree to which we remember ourselves is the degree to which we will also remember the beautiful ecosystem of life that is here for us and that we rely upon in the interconnected web of beings that inhabit this earth together with us.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. So let me ask you, Zvi, a final question. Given the world situation of dismemberment.
Yeah.
And the fact that scientists are telling us that we've become so dismembered, we may be about ready to lose it.
Yes.
We have a finite amount of time to find ourselves and remember. Given everything that you know, I mean, you teach wisdom traditions, you're obviously a seeker and master of the Kabbalah. If anybody can be a master of the Kabbalah, that may be too strong a statement for anyone, even Luria. But what would you offer to us? We're in the middle of a pandemic. The world is out of control. We're in an endangered, fretful, anxious, delicate, fragile moment in terms of the human journey and all of our individual journeys as well, simultaneously. What about the Kabbalah and that great, rich tradition? Could you tease out one or two principles that you feel are particularly salient to guide us through this dark night?
Yes, thank you. Beautifully put. I agree. We are at an inflection point in some sense. We are at a fulcrum. We are on a precipice as human beings. And I would share two things. It's really one thing with two facets of it. One, from the Kabbalistic perspective, as we shared, as we discussed earlier, the rememberment is also it's a feminine art. It's the art of the feminine principle, right? This is indeed the wisdom of the feminine, if I, to use these traditional categories. Embodying, connecting to earth, connecting to the organic cycle of life and its wisdom and its intelligence. And most significantly, and this brings me to the second dimension, the feminine principle is intrinsically oriented toward the good of the whole. What is the good of the whole? What is in the good of all? How can everyone have their needs met? When we understand our place in the tapestry of creation, when we understand who we are as an individual and our inseparability from the body, we are like, we are one cell in a shared body, in a shared organism. The problem is these days is that human beings have long forgotten that we believe we are an individual cell living in isolation, and that it's even possible to survive that way is so is so preposterous, and disconnected from reality on so many levels, right? But certainly we will never thrive without a full embrace of the totality of the living body within which we are, swimming. We're swimming in how much of our body is made up of fluid, right? And so the fluids of life, again, the feminine, the fluids of life, the intercellular, substance is the waters of life that the Kabbalah speaks of, right? And we have forgotten how to draw from the well. We have forgotten how to nourish ourselves, because we have forgotten that in order for one cell to be nourished, the whole organism has to be nourished. The whole organism requires access to the living waters of life. And unless we, as a human community, sort of radically shift into a perspective that embraces that principle of life, then we unfortunately are not going to make it. We just simply won't, right? Because it is it's a distorted and mistaken kind of view to see ourselves in isolation. And so for our times, right, how do we do this? For me, a lot of it is about reconnecting to our bodies, to ourselves, and to our communities, and to the organic cycles of life that we have lost in modern society, to the feminine arts of relating, of sharing, of looking out for the whole as a primary value. Yeah. Coming from within, not as because we're superimposing some kind of a moral principle. It's actually just, it's an outflowing of wisdom that comes when we actually feel into the, into the well springs of our own being, right? When we experience presence arising and filling and flowing and living through our bodies, it's like, then what's natural is an outflowing. That's just the way the current flows. It's not like about adapting some kind of a new doctrine. It's like all we have to do is just like actually connect deeply to ourselves in a way that holds the totality. And from my view, this is the true kind of secret of Kabbalah. Kabbalah means receiving, as I said. And the receiving is a different kind of posture than conquering, than going, than getting, than doing, than performing. It's like we've forgotten how to actually receive the water, receive the nourishment, to receive the life that's already here, to receive the simplicities of connection that is available to us right here, right in our arms and legs. They're the closest thing to us, and yet so forgotten. Yeah. Or our beloved, or our children, or our parents, or our friends, right? Like that's the wisdom that that I am drawing at this particular time. And one more last thing I'll say, because I know we're probably getting close to our time. I also experience, and this is more of I'll share a more personal experience at this time of really unprecedented, or at least in my lifetime, kind of point of potential, catastrophe on the one hand, and awakening and evolution on the other, right? It's like we're at this moment of potentiality, it feels like to me, that we can either kind of step into a radical upgrade, if you will, of consciousness on a collective level, or we can devolve into sort of the distorted kind of, old programs and mainframes and operating systems, which will, drive us into annihilation. As we do this, and as we face this kind of inflection point, I feel more light, more actual, this light of primordial goodness that is present for us as human beings than I have ever felt in my lifetime. It's as if like the forces of goodness, the forces of light that inhabit the cosmos, that inhabit our deepest inner core, right? But long hidden. It's wanting so much to be seen, to be known, to be in support of us as a human collective at this time. I feel that we have an opportunity now to open to this particular kind of support and transmission of wisdom in a way that, you know, feels more potent at this time than it has to me before. And so one last word, since you asked, you know, what do I have? What is my, you know, sort of, I don't know, counsel or suggestions? And again, you know, these are suggestions and counsel that I hold for myself, right? I'm just sharing them with this community, all who are present right here. What a powerful moment that that so many people are watching this, that are sharing in the spirit, that a mandala of consciousness right now is being crafted just through our shared presence. And it's almost like we are forming a vehicle in this moment through which all of these potent forces of light can download and integrate into our personal mainframes, and we can bring them, you know, into our communities, into our homes, into our relationships, and into all of the works that we're doing in the world. Like that light can become a kind of guiding, shining force that emanates through us and illuminates and brings a different possibility and perspective to all those who inhabit the earth who have not yet perhaps had the gifted moment of altered perception of what's possible. So may we all be blessed, you know, at this time to really experience the light, to embody the light, to remember ourselves as individuals and as a collective, so that our full potential, the full organic destiny and possibility of our human nature can come into fruition.
Beautifully put, Zvi. What a beautiful man you are. What a beautiful soul. It's I feel deeply moved by your words, and thank you for sharing them at this time when we need to go as deep back into our bodies, back into the natural order, back into the mother. Allow the feminine to rise around us and through us, and to feel our sensuality, to feel the eros, the foundation of love that leads us to beauty, to you know, that we're embodied being. I love your term, we're enfleshed. And that's who we are. So I deeply thank you for this wisdom today, and want to invite everyone that can to join our after session chat. Zvi, I hope you can join and maybe say something about Kedumah, the organization you've got, and the Kedumah Experience. I think he's been sharing the Kedumah Experience for the last hour and some minutes. And Stan, you put the link in the chat. That would be great. And then on Monday, we're going to move to the next level by listening to an Englishman who has been working for many years on what they call the Harmony Project. You know, taking on this one little piece Zvi's talk about remembering. What principles should guide us as we remember that we are nature? That'll be the subject for Monday, 5:00 p.m. Central European Time for Humanity Rising. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Zvi, blessings upon you. You've graced us with deep wisdom today.
Thank you so much.
And many, many thanks. Thank you all. Bye-bye.